Hello and welcome back to Casual Revolt. I am here to review a video. It's a very short video. Many of you probably remember this from your childhoods, especially if you're an American. There were a series of videos that would air on television that were that were educational, and it was called Schoolhouse Rock, and they would often have a musical accompaniment, and they would teach children about a variety of topics: English, grammar, history, science, government, things like that. And they'd be pretty short, and they had, like I said, very catchy tunes. And I still remember when I was younger, we would still watch these videos, which were originally made in the 70s. We were still watching them in the 1990s. I know also in the 1980s, they were still pretty popular. Uh, but I have not seen these videos since I was a child. Um, and from what I've heard, I probably will have a very different opinion of them now that I watch them as an adult. Uh, so I'm gonna just play the video. We'll see what I think about it. Um, I will say this one is called Elbow Room, and apparently it's a short educational video about the United States westward expansion. So from, I'm guessing, like the time of Thomas Jefferson, probably. Uh, I'm not sure how far up it goes of, colonists moving west in what was called Manifest Destiny. So let's get right into it. And here we go.
One thing you will discover when you get next to one another is everybody needs some elbow room, elbow room. It's nice when you're kind of cozy, but not when you're tangled nose to nosy. Oh, everybody needs some needs a little elbow room. That's how it was in the early days of the USA.
So, okay. Yeah. That's an oversimplification, right? It wasn't that people were so jam-packed on the eastern coast of the United States that they needed more elbow room, that they literally were, pushing up against each other. One of the big issues here was that most of society at the time lived an agricultural life. They had plots of farmland, and what they produced from that land was basically how they survived. And as generations of Americans came and went, so a family would own a plot of land, and then when the owner of that plot passed away, the farm would be broken into parcels and given to the eldest son, the sons. Okay, typically the eldest son would get the most land. Women weren't even considered in this scenario. I mean, there were a few times where women were given land, but that was not even considered. This was very different time in that regard. And so as these plots of land got smaller and smaller because of those rules of inheritance, you can imagine by like the third or fourth generation, you would have a very small plot of land. A male would have a very small plot of land as it was broken down further and further into smaller parcels. So one of the big desires of people and one of the big reasons they wanted to start moving out west was so that there would be more land for these children to have plots of their own and have a homestead and have a family. So it wasn't necessarily all this butting up against each other stuff. Regardless, that might just be a bit of a small thing, but let's see where this goes.
Kept coming to settle, though the East was the only place there was to go. The president was Thomas Jefferson. He made a deal with Napoleon. How'd you like to sell a mile or two?
Or 3 or 100 or 1,000.
And so in 1803 the Louisiana Territory was sold to us without a fuss and gave us lots of elbow room. Oh, elbow room.
Okay, without a fuss. So yeah, there was the Louisiana Purchase where Jefferson bought a very large swath of territory for pretty inexpensive from Napoleon. But there were already people living in that huge swath of territory. There were colonists already living there, like French colonists. There were also lots of Native Americans who were not happy with this transaction, as you can imagine, and were especially not happy with the number of colonists who started flooding in and basically launching a genocidal removal of the natives. Okay, so it's kind of dark to see all these happy dancing colonists, knowing that they are about to push other people off their land, often kill them. Um, yeah, not really a good look, modern day, especially.
Elbow room, got to get us some elbow room. It's the West or bust. In God we trust. There's a new land out there.
Yeah, again, hardly a new land. The land had been there, and people had already been living there. So, yeah.
Lewis and Clark volunteered to go. Goodbye, good luck, wear your overcoat. They prepared for good times and for bad, and for bad. They hired a Sacagawea to be their guide.
Also kind of dark, they showed one of them, I don't know if that was meant to be Lewis or Clark, brandishing a musket, saying they prepared for good times and for bad. Yeah, I mean, I guess wild animals and such, but I don't know. I just get the impression that could also include natives who are not particularly happy about people trespassing on their land and or I don't know, but it now has a bit of a dark tinge for me, okay?
She led them all across the countryside, reached the coast, and found the most elbow room we've ever had. The way was opened up for folks with bravery. There were plenty of fights.
Oh, okay. Yeah, the way was opened up for folks with bravery. Admittedly, that is true. Okay, as people started moving west, it was a very dangerous trip to take. If anyone's ever played or heard of Oregon Trail, which was an old game, people died along these trails heading west all the time, whether from cholera, disease. They would be raided by Native Americans. Death and misery abounded on a lot of these trails. So, yeah, I would say it definitely took a lot of courage to pick up your family and move out west. Though a lot of people were able to do this because they really had no choice in the matter. They had no economic chances back home. And this was really the only way to secure their future was to move out west. That being said, the kind of silly adding there in the video of an arrow going through that guy's hat with a cute little rubber thing on the front of it is, again, kind of dark. Not only because some of these colonists were killed by natives, but because that kind of hints at the fact that a lot of the native peoples living out in the West were not happy with all these people coming onto their land and taking it and often pushing them off their land. Okay, this time period was rife with conflicts between the natives and colonists, and oftentimes the federal government. And later on, President Jackson, signed the Indian Removal Act, which forcibly relocated thousands of Cherokee Indians or Native Americans, whatever you would like to call them, from the eastern United States to Oklahoma. And it was called the Trail of Tears because many of them died along the way. And Oklahoma was a pretty barren piece of land. That's why they were settled there, because no one else really wanted it. In what today is widely considered by historians an act of genocide, an act of extermination, essentially, or a forcible relocation of these natives. Yeah.
To win land rights, but the West was meant to be. It was a manifest destiny. The trappers, traders, and the peddlers, the politicians and the settlers, they got the there by any way they could. The gold rush trampled down the wilderness, the railroads spread across from east to west, and soon the rest was opened up for good. And now we jet from east to west.
On a side note here, that railroad, the Intercontinental Railroad, which was an amazing accomplishment, it really was. That being said, wasn't exactly a pleasant thing. Thousands of Chinese laborers died constructing it. They were very badly mistreated. So to see that portrayed as kind of a cutesy, look at these people hammering it in, I don't know about that.
Goodbye, New York, LOLA. But it took those early folks to open up the way.
Okay, also, this is just skipping a whole bunch of history, all right? Suddenly, we're talking about airplanes, okay? Manifest Destiny, which, by the way, the video accurately sort of characterized as this sense of we have a destiny to move out west and own the whole territory. Though that idea was really heavily mixed up with ideas of racial superiority, of white racial superiority. They also, as they moved out west, like I said, they removed the natives. Those that weren't removed were often forcibly assimilated into, I guess, white American society. They would basically abduct Native American children and put them into schools where their culture was essentially destroyed and blotted out, and those were extremely abusive places to begin with. Canada had a similar thing going on, and many of those they once in a while will find a mass grave from students who died of disease. It was a horrific experience. On top of that, Manifest Destiny also included things like the Mexican-American War, where the United States, now this is an oversimplification, but for the sake of time, conquered chunks of land from Mexico and annexed it to the United States. There were also tons of conflict that this caused, because as the United States expanded out west, there were debates over which of the states would be slave-owning states and which would not be slave-owning states. And a lot of one of the big reasons that the Civil War ended up happening was because of westward expansion. There was so much conflict over whether new states would be slave or free, okay? So there was lots of conquest that happened in this time. Lots of bloodshed over not only the issue of slavery, but over conquering these territories. And yeah, so it was not just people moving out west. It was also military conquest. It was assimilation, pretty violent and unpleasant assimilation. And so a lot of stuff happened in that time between Jefferson, obviously, and modern era. Okay.
We jet from east to west, goodbye New York, LOLA. But it took those early folks to open up the way. Now we've got a lot of room to be growing from sea to shining sea. Guess that we have got our elbow room. But if there should ever come a time when we're crowded up together, I'm sure we'll find some elbow room up on the moon. Oh, elbow room, elbow room. Got to get us some elbow room. It's the moon or bust. In God we trust. There's a new land up there.
We'll return after.
Okay, so that was Schoolhouse Rock Elbow Room. I think I've said most of what I would want to add to that. It is pretty horrifying to see this video after not seeing it for so many years, and seeing how it completely downplays a lot of the atrocities and such that took place. and way oversimplified them, skipped a lot of history. Also, I just wanted to add one last thing, though. At the end there, where it said, now we have plenty of elbow room. Okay. Uh, what about the natives? Well, they still exist. Very few of them exist, but they have all been forced onto reservations, which have very high rates of substance abuse, poverty. They are not very great place. I don't want to generalize here, but in terms of the economics of it and stuff, they're not pleasant places to live, and the natives have been essentially forced to live there. Yeah, we may have gained a lot of elbow room, but the natives are now confined in these tight spaces, and the outlook is not good. Okay, so just be aware of videos, especially old videos like this. I actually knew a teacher once who was still using these in the classroom in 2000 and what was it, 2019. So just be aware, okay? Sometimes, and I know this is for children, but sometimes when we oversimplify things, especially if that's the only thing we see, we get a completely distorted vision of the reality of what happened historically, okay? So just be aware of that. All right. Please keep an eye for the next video. I'm working on getting more out there, and I'll see you all soon. Bye-bye.